think about how canning came to be, how it was in areas before jars and lids and rings and electric water bath and electric pressure canners were available, what did our ancestors do? Stay tuned because we're going to take a little walk down memory lane. So you all may notice I'm in the same shirt that I'm going to be in. I'm not sure what order I'm going to open these videos and post them, but at any rate, I actually did a video this morning, and if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to want to stay tuned for some pineapple zucchini. But this morning, as I was lamenting all of the preserving that I had to do, I started to think, and I actually pulled out, y'all, some of my really old canning books. So this is a Ball Blue book, and it is from 1938. This was my mother's, and I will tell you, some of the directions are hilarious. It says hot water bath for 20 minutes, remove from canner and seal immediately. Not sure how you would seal it outside the canner, but that's what most of the recipes say. But I have to tell you, it even has recipes for canning fried chicken. Now, if you think back to 1938, my dad was born in 32, my mom was born in 35, my grandma, my mom's mom, was born in 1898. They went through a period of time where they had large families to feed, but, you know, limited resources or limited ways to preserve the food, lack of refrigeration. My parents grew up without electricity, so they had an icebox. My mom had an icebox. I don't think my dad's side did. This book is very, very interesting. It is all about canned foods, and I cannot find a production date of this. This I purchased, and then I think that's it on the canning books that I wanted to share. But I can remember, y'all, canning 42 years ago, making jam, not water bathing it, kind of a scary thought, I know, and how the jars were sealed was the way I was taught. You simply turn them over, and the heat against the lid would make it seal. So I thought, I bet you my Foxfire series has some information about preserving food. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and discouraged, just be grateful and thankful that you don't have to use these methods. Now, I don't like to be read to, but I'm going to try to do it in a story type way that won't be offensive to you. But I want to tell you a little bit about how they preserved various fruits and vegetables. So this says, Leslie Connor remembered her family's method for preserving fruits and vegetables. Before we bought our deep freeze, people ain't had deep freezes so long, you know. In the fall of the year, we'd put up a big barrel of bleached fruit, apples. Just peel them and bleach them in sulfur. We'd have a barrel of bleached fruit, and we'd have a barrel of kraut, and that's the way we spent the winter, with stuff like that to eat. Several people told us that unless the fruit was prepared with too much water when it was later cooked, they could not taste the sulfur used in the process, and the bleached fruit was actually quite good. And I want to tell y'all, I've had some bleached apples and in a stack cake, and they were actually delicious, and I could not taste the sulfur. The fruit was just as pretty and white as it could be. My mother, aunts, and sisters would cut up apples to smoke them in the fall. They'd cut them up, put them in a basket with an iron pan, then sprinkle a little sulfur on it to preserve the apples. They'd store them in a churn. We had fresh fruit all winter. You don't hear of smoked fruit anymore, and that's true, you don't. So another common method was drying. Ruby Eller recalled how people found a way to make the chore of peeling the apples to be dried as a social event, and I think this is so lovely. There were candy drawings, corn shuckings, apple peelings for social get-togethers. In the summer, when the apples would get ripe, people dried a lot of them. They would meet at somebody's house one night to peel a bunch of apples and have them ready to set out in the sun to dry the next day. With the bird poop and the flies. They go to a different house each night and help one another. Lucy York found a slightly more convenient way to dry apples, especially in times of rainy or bad weather. I would peel my apples and slice them and put them in the oven when I finished cooking a meal. I'd slip the trays in there and leave the oven door open. It would take several days for them to dry because I would leave them in there only until the oven cooled down. So they used a very common way to dehydrate even back then. And I would say these are people that did grow up in the Depression, and this is, Appalachian roots. Another way, and I know, guys, it's burying, but that's not the way you say it. It's burying. My mother said it till the day she died. So burying apples, beets, cabbage, potatoes, and turnips. Okay, wait for it. Although drying was a common method of preservation, it was by no means the only one used. Burying fruits and vegetables was both an excellent means of preserving food and a testament to the ingenuity of the mountaineers. In order for the food to keep, the hole had to be well drained and insulated to prevent water from accumulating and freezing. Sally Beatty remembers well her family's potato hole. Another way we kept our food was by putting it in a hole in the ground. We did our potatoes like this. After we dug up potatoes in the fall, we would dig a hole in the ground and put them in it. We would put straw or whatever we could find around them. Then we'd hill them up. Next, we put dirt on top of them to keep them from freezing. Then we took an old piece of board or tin and put over we called it a hill, so it wouldn't get so wet. You could do turnips and cabbage the same way. Then, as you wanted a mess, and a mess is just, a cooking of, you would go out there and get whatever you wanted at the time. Guys, can you imagine? We have all of the conveniences, and yet sometimes the overwhelm of harvest can weigh heavy on us. But let's talk a little bit about canning. And this was Minnie Daly. This is who they interviewed. Back then, there wasn't no money much, and we had to grow what we had to eat. We grew beans, cabbage, tomatoes, and everything like that in our garden. We canned everything we grew. We dried fruit, too. My mother dried blackberries. She just put them on a cloth and let them dry. After she dried them, she cooked them with a little water. Then she would sweeten them. You could make pies out of them or anything you wanted to. Why, that was good. They aren't as good dried as they was canned, but back then they didn't have too many cans to can in. Now, y'all, I know that this isn't proper English. I'm reading it as it was written. So, this is a quote from Minnie Daly that summarizes how much food preservation has changed in the past century. Although definitely one of the better means of keeping food, canning could not be used until glass jars became common and cheap enough for the average family to afford. By the 1930s, when glass jars became readily available, canning quickly became widespread and is still very common today. Roberta Hicks said, "I grew corn, green beans, taters, okra, and tomatoes in my garden. In those days, you had to can everything. I canned beans in half-gallon jars." I'm sure the USDA is like sweating as I'm reading this. And jelly in quart jars. Can you imagine a quart of jelly? Yum. I canned a lot of tomatoes. One year, I canned 1,000 jars. And having a father that was one of 10, not all which lived to adulthood, there were a lot of hungry mouths to feed. I'm sure my grandma canned 1,000 jars quite easily. I had 18 different kinds of jams and jellies. I might have that too. I had 7 or 8 dozen jars of applesauce and 150 cans of green beans and about 100 and something quarts of peaches. We also had cows and pigs. We raised most of our own meat, but I say most of our food was from the things I home canned. Over the years, the process of canning has changed. Now we have pressure cookers and stove timers and the USDA and the Ball Canning Book. However, years ago, food had to be canned by the open kettle method. And y'all, I wonder how many people passed away from being contaminated with botulism from home canned food. But here we go. Lola Cannon said, "I learned to can by the open kettle method." This was where you cooked your food in an open kettle and had your jars sterilized and standing right there. You put your hot food in the jars and sealed them from the heat of the food. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I first started canning jams and jellies, by turning the jar upside down, getting the lid real hot, turning it back up. It would seal. Doesn't mean it's safe, guys. Don't do it. Um, it was hard to keep. You pretty well have to process your jars after they're sealed. Later on, several different types of canners came along. We had a pressure canner. Bessie Underwood remembers canning in an open wash tub. I will never complain about harvest again. I have canned beans on the wood stove in a wash tub. I boiled them for 3 hours. I bet those tasted really delicious. Sally Beatty gave a detailed account of this method of canning. When we canned our beans, we would pick them, string them, and break them. Then we would cook them outside for 3 hours in a big wash tub over a fire. This would help the beans keep longer. Most of our vegetables we did like this. We put tomatoes and corn and okra in our homemade soup. We scalded our tomatoes and pulled the skin off. Then we cut our corn and okra up and mixed it with salt. Then we cooked it in a hot water bath or on the top of the stove or in the side in a wash tub with a fire around it. So when you think about how far we've come, y'all, not only food safety, but I would say if you're cooking something for 3 hours, any of the nutrition is probably going to leach out into the water. Now, if you're using that in a soup, that's going to help. But I can't imagine that the food was very palatable. So I started also thinking about Chow Chow because I'm trying to preserve everything I possibly can that comes out of my garden. So I did a little research on Chow Chow. Who knew? I always thought Chow Chow was an Amish thing. And while there are Amish recipes for Chow Chow, I am going to be using the Ball canning book, and actually we'll be filming this over 2 days. It will just be a moment for you. So Chow Chow came to the South U.S. during the expulsion of the Acadian people from Nova Scotia and their settlement in Louisiana. Eaten by itself, or it can be a condiment, okay, wait for it, y'all, on fish cakes, mashed potatoes, biscuits and gravy, never, hot dogs, and hamburgers, which, it's kind of a relishy thing, a vegetable relishy thing. The Chow Chow I have eaten in my life and purchased from Amish stores, I've always eaten by itself, like with hamburgers and hot dogs, but as a side dish. In the early 20th century, it was mostly comprised of cucumber, onion, cauliflower, green peppers, left overnight in a brine, and then boiled in vinegar and mustard and celery seed. It hasn't changed that much, but there are so many regional variations. Who knew? So there's a northern variation, which is primarily Pennsylvanian. I would say it has an Amish influence. There's a southern and a Canadian. Now, it doesn't really say in the Ball canning book what version of Chow Chow it is. I actually chose that recipe, number one, because it's USDA approved. Number two, I have all the things on hand from my garden. So I will be making this over today and tomorrow because you have to leave it overnight in a brine. So let's get into the kitchen and figure out what's going to go into my Chow Chow. I hope you'll stay tuned. So the recipe I'm going to be using today is on page 221 of the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. If you have the one with this cover, I think there's newer ones, y'all, but I don't have them. They're all very similar. So it says, in a large glass or stainless steel, I'm going to be using a stainless steel bowl, combine cucumber, peppers, cabbage, onion, green tomatoes. So that's what we're going to work on first. Now, it does have a note about the cucumbers. It says use English cucumbers because many times when you purchase cucumbers, they're waxed. I don't have to worry about this. These are organically grown cucumbers. So what I'm going to start by doing, y'all, is I'm going to fill up my sink with some cold water. I am going to add some of my Thieves fruit and vegetable wash. And guys, this is basically just essential oils, but it's very, very good to remove the dirt, germs, etc. So I have peppers. Guys, I've got all the things. that have not been washed. I have some green tomatoes that have not been washed. I think I have more green peppers somewhere. Oh yeah, right here. And it actually calls for red pepper, y'all. I don't have red pepper, so I am going to use green pepper. What I'd also like to add is a little bit of jalapeno, but I'm going to follow the recipe and be a good girl this time. So I'm going to let this soak just for a few minutes. And since I don't need to peel my cucumbers, the first thing I'm going to prep and put in my bowl is 2 cups of chopped cucumber. So we'll let these hang out for a few minutes, and I will get chopping on the cucumber. Then we'll come back and talk about the rest of the ingredients, the brine we will prepare. Then it's going to sit overnight, and tomorrow morning we will finish it up and prepare to can it. I hope you'll stay tuned and enjoy this recipe. Next ingredient, 1.5 cups of chopped bell pepper. It does specify red. I don't have red. And I realize I'm using a liquid measuring cup, y'all, but it's approximate. So the next ingredient, interestingly enough, is 1.5 cups of chopped cabbage. Now, I still have a cabbage left that I grew. I'm so happy with my cabbage. So what I'm going to do with this, let's cut it in half. I'm going to cut out the core, which is good for eating, guys. Don't throw that away. It can be a little hard on the teeth, so use caution that way. I'm going to take the core out. Maybe. Okay, come on with it. This is what I tell the chickens all the time. Come on with it, because they'll stand by the gate like, I'm thinking about coming out. All right, there's a little bit of a boo-boo right here, so we're going to take that piece off. And I'm going to cut the half in half. Sorry, guys. Oh, that's really good. Did you like my hand? I'm going to cut the half in half. And then I'm just going to slice it thinly like this. I don't think it'll require the entire cabbage, but we're going to just cut it up. And this has been washed and the outer leaves taken off. Any really hard pieces that were close to the core, I'll pull out. So let's see what we got here. And they're still, ooh, I don't want that. They're still quite edible. And you want to pack it down. So yeah, 1.5 cups. So I'm probably a little heavy on the veg, but that's okay. More is better. Then our last ingredient is green tomatoes, and we need 1.5 cups chopped cored green tomatoes, unpeeled. So I had a oopsie today when I was harvesting. I don't know if I can core that. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I can. And I accidentally harvested a tomato that was quite green. They will ripen up in the windowsill. These are the purple tomatoes. So you're going to notice kind of a funny color inside. That does not mean they're bad. And what did I say? 1.5 cups. So I'm just going to slice these up. I think this recipe would be a good end of season way to use up. Maybe you have a lot of green tomatoes. Last year, y'all, I put my green tomatoes in a cardboard box, covered them with newspaper, and I had ripe, beautiful tomatoes at Thanksgiving time. So don't waste any of your harvest. And I think I've shared on an earlier video, this year I don't think I'm going to have a fall garden, simply because, and I hope y'all will understand, and this is probably the ugliest tomato you've ever seen. Look at this monster. It's got a lot of signs where it's been too dry, so it's going to be a perfect one. Let's see if I can core it first. The reason I don't think I'm going to do a fall garden, I may do some radish or lettuce or such, is I'm only feeding myself, and my garden has been so prolific this year, it really does not make sense to, just keep producing food. Now I want to take that off. Let's try the bigger knife. Yeah. So we'll take that little bit off. Wow. I think I need some sharper knives, y'all. Okay, there we go. But this is a great use for a tomato that likely wouldn't be very appetizing once it was fully ripe. Just with all the blemishes that might get worse with ripening. And you can see there's a little blush to it, but these are largely green tomatoes, and I think this is probably gonna be my cup and a half. Okay, so let's give her a slice. Huh, what an interesting tomato. All right, I'm gonna continue to just chop this up, put it in the bowl. I'll bring you back for next steps. All right, y'all, our last ingredient is a cup and a half of onions, thinly sliced. So I am using onions that I grew this year that are also organically grown. They're yellow onion. This just says onion. But let me tell you guys, these things pack a punch, a punch, a punch. So what I'm doing is cut them in thin slices, then pop out the rings. I think that's gonna look good in the relish, because part of the thing is I want the jars to be pretty, but of course tasty too. It's not just all about the looks. Now tomorrow, which will just be a moment for you, we will be adding some ingredients to this, some veg, and that is blanched green beans and blanched carrots, both of which I grew. But for today, let me red up some room here, guys. I've been canning this morning and there's things everywhere. We are going to make a salt brine to put over this, and we are going to leave it overnight, and then tomorrow we will finish it up with the spices, the vinegar, etc. So let me get this straightened up. I'll be right back. The next directions are to take 8 cups of water and add a cup and a half of pickling salt. So I decided to mix it in the bowl first, but I want to tell y'all, the only thing that is special about this is the ingredients are salt. So while it is technically pickling and canning salt, it's simply non-iodized salt. So you can use other types of salt, i.e. pink Himalayan, to achieve the same thing. So I have had that Mrs. Wages bag for quite some time, so I'm kind of glad to use it up, even though salt does not expire necessarily. All right, so let me get a spoon here, because I can't have everything out, y'all. You know that. I would be too organized. All right. I'm going to give this a good stir. Let it kind of dissolve a little bit so that I'm not getting so much salt maybe stuck on a particular veg. So what the directions actually say, when we're waiting for that to dissolve a little bit, it says cover and let stand in a cool place, 70 to 75 degrees, so it can set out at room temperature if your house is that way, for 12 hours or overnight. And then tomorrow we'll transfer it to a colander. We'll put it under running water and squeeze out the excess, and then we'll be making the true brine and adding the additional vegetables. So my water's pink because I put some pink Himalayan in there. So woo, into the pot we go. I'm gonna rinse out that last bit of salt, and guys, because I have it, I'm using RO, or reverse osmosis water. So let's give these all a good baptizing. I'm gonna set this aside in the front room so the cat isn't tempted to drink out of it. God love Frankie. It's a mess. He probably would only take one drink and realize it wasn't so tasty. All right, y'all. I will see you in the morning, but it'll just be a second for you. Good morning, day 2. I told you it would only be a moment for you all. So we're continuing on with our Chow Chow relish. I realized because I edited the first half of the video that I didn't talk about how much cucumber to put in there, only to use non-waxed. So either from your garden or a fresh produce stand, or you can use English cucumbers, because leaving the peel on, what they say here, we don't peel the cucumber for use in this recipe because the skin brightens up the color of the relish. So what I ended up with was 2 cups of cucumber, 1.5 cups of bell pepper, 1.5 cups of cabbage, 1.5 cups of onions, and 1.5 cups of cored green tomatoes, skin on. So now what I've done, and y'all, it smells fabulous. Let me swing you around, and let's see if I can swing you down without, yeah. So I put all of our veg, and guys, I said 1.5 cups of salt, it was a cup, so I have rinsed and rinsed and rinsed. I kind of got onto a different recipe on the other page, but at any rate, it's fine. This smells so good, but you want to rinse and rinse and rinse and drain it really well. So why soak it in the salt water? Well, it's part of the pickling process, number one, but also it's going to extract out excess water, so you're left with a truer flavor of the veg. So let's get over to the stove. We're gonna start cooking this, and while it cooks, I'll get my jars washed and in the canner warming up. All right, y'all, so let's see, okay. We will be adding green beans and carrots, but not till a little later in the process. So it says in a large stainless steel saucepan, I have an enamel coated one, combine 1 cup of water and 3 cups of white vinegar. And I have pre-measured just to make the video not be so long. So I've added that to our veg. Our drained and well-rinsed vegetables are in here. And then you want to add, it's a lot, guys, 3 cups of sugar. So let's measure that out. Excuse my reach. So here's 1, 2, and 3. And y'all, I don't recommend from a safety standpoint that you vary those amounts. Even though we're using quite a bit of vinegar and there are tomatoes in here, the cucumbers, the peppers, the cabbage, and the onion are considered low acid, and this is a water bath can recipe, so we want to make sure we follow the instructions to a T. All right, the next thing we're going to add is 3 tablespoons of mustard seed, not powdered mustard, the mustard seed, 2 tablespoons of celery seed, 1 tablespoon of ground turmeric. So that's what I have in this little dish here. How efficient am I, y'all? And we're gonna give it a stir, and I'm gonna crank up the heat. And it says, bring it to a boil over medium-high heat. Add the green beans and carrots and return it to a boil. It actually says add the veg, but it's all right. It'll be fine. Too much salt, boil it a little longer. It's not gonna hurt anything. So let's talk about the additional vegetables that we'll need. We need 1.5 cups of green beans, blanched. And I don't know if I did a video on this or not, y'all, but these are my homegrown green beans that I blanched and froze, and I thawed overnight in the fridge. And then 1.5 cups of blanched carrots. And they recommend a 30-second dip in boiling water and then immediately cool, which is what I did with the carrots. That is not what I did with the green beans because I froze them. I believe I blanched them for 3 minutes, but it's still gonna be fine, y'all. Why do we blanch vegetables? Blanching inactivates the enzyme that can cause undesirable changes in the color and texture of your veg. So I've said it many, many times, y'all. The quality of your food is not gonna improve by canning it, so you want to make sure that you follow all of these little recommendations. And while this took a little while, y'all, hey, it's harvest season. That's what we do, we can. So this morning, I actually took care of, and I'm not sure the order you're going to see it, of all of yesterday's canning, washed the jars, checked the seals, labeled them, and put them in the pantry. So I'm going to bring this up to a boil. I'm going to add the veg, And then I am going to simmer it, stirring frequently until it thickens to the consistency of a thin commercial relish, about 40 minutes. So I'll bring you back once we get all the veg in, show you what it looks like. Guys, I think this is going to be absolutely delicious as a little scoopy side dish. It does have quite a bit of sugar in it. I can't speak to using, you know, a substitute type sugar. I would not do that personally. But you'll also have to remember this is going to make many, many jars of relish. The yield is about 7 of the jelly size or 8-ounce jars. I think mine will make more because if you remember yesterday, I kind of over measured certain things. So I did add a tiny bit of extra water. That is not going to impact the food safety. I just wanted to have enough liquid to properly can them. So you can hear Miss Cindy coming up to temperature. I'm going to get busy washing my jars, rings, and lids, and I will bring you back once we've added the vegetables, bring it back to a boil, and we'll get ready to start our timing. Stay tuned. All right, y'all, our mix has come up to a heavy boil. We're gonna add in our, well, I opened this, our green beans, maybe, there we go. And our carrots, and again, it's 1.5 cups of each. And I will wash out. I love these reusable baggies, y'all. They are just wonderful. So how pretty is this gonna be, right? And it makes me super happy to think that I made this from all homegrown, organically grown, fresh ingredients, other than the fact I freeze the green beans, but they were blanched and frozen relatively recently. So we're going to bring this back up to a boil, which doesn't sound like it's going to take too long. Then I'm going to reduce the heat, set the timer for 40 minutes. I did get my jars washed. It takes a while for this to come up to a boil, y'all. And they're in the canner, just set on warm. And we'll let this cook. And I'll bring you back to show you what the consistency of a thin commercial relish is. Y'all, I mean, I've used commercial relish, but I guess the idea is you want to let some of the liquid boil away. I'm not really sure. Or maybe it will just thicken with the sugar and the vinegar and the starch from the vegetables. We shall see. All right, I'll bring you back shortly. All right, y'all, our relish our relish, or Chow Chow, has definitely thickened up. It smells amazing. Now, I will tell you all, I'm not a huge fan of celery salt, or I'm sorry, celery period, but whenever I use celery seed or salt in canning, I always feel like I've gotten too much. But once it processes, it kind of changes things. So we're going to fill our hot jars with this hot liquid. Definitely want to debubble, and you want to try to get a variety, if you will, of the veg in there. 1/2-inch headspace. Wipe our rims. Lid and ring. Ouch. Today I am using ball lids, but I do like the 4 jars. I just don't have failures with 4 jars. So you want to make sure that your veg is covered with the liquid. And that might be a little bit over full. So once you debubble, sometimes, oopsie, carry it overboard. You may have to take out a little bit. Well, I'm not doing so good, am I? And I will also share with you, because this has turmeric in it, and I probably said turmeric, but it's turmeric. It does have a tendency to stain your canning mat or towel. So we're going to go into the canner with this, and I will bring you back to talk about processing time and share how many jars I got. I ended up, guys, with 11 half pints and 1 pint. So I would have had 13 8-ounce jars. Now, the reason that I have more is because I added additional cucumber and I added a little additional cabbage. I probably overmeasured on my veg intentionally, guys, because I wanted more. The processing time is 10 minutes if you're at 1,000 feet below, so I'm going to process for 15. The pint, even though I'm processing it so it'll be appropriately cooked and taste right, will go directly into my refrigerator, and so I'm not going to increase the time beyond the 15 minutes because I have 1 pint, because I plan to eat it and refrigerate it right away. I hope that makes sense. All right, y'all, I'll bring you back when we have them out of the canner. And I left a little bit for a taste test. So let's, okay, I left like almost nothing, but a little bit of the liquid. So let's just give that a taste because it smells amazing. You all, yeah, buddy, that is delicious. It has a sweet pickle taste, but I think it's going to be a really nice fresh addition if you're having a rich meal, or you just want a little side of veg and you don't feel like preparing a full-on vegetable. I will see you in about 15, 20, 25 minutes. I need to let the canner cool down when we bring out our jars and give you some final thoughts. Stay tuned. Well, y'all, how beautiful is this Chow Chow? I thought I would go ahead and turn the camera on because it's been pinging like crazy over here. Yep, there we go. Seal, seal, seal. So I did process for 15 because of my altitude. Oh, of course. Oh, well. Seal, seal. So I am super pleased. Y'all, look how gorgeous this is. It would have been even more colorful by using red bell peppers, but y'all, I'm just going to use what I have, and I think it looks fine. The carrots, definitely being the red Kyoto red carrots, add a little color to it, but I'm super excited about eating this. Y'all, I think it's going to be a good one. So drop me a comment below if you would. First of all, go ahead and smash that like button. I appreciate that so much. That really helps YouTube know to share my video. And it helps me out greatly, so I definitely appreciate it. And I also wanted to say, y'all, today is August 1st. And so I'm not sure when you're going to see this, but today is my 3-year anniversary with YouTube. And, you know, I'm so happy I decided to do YouTube because I had a lot of nerves. If you go back, y'all don't do it, and watch my first video, you're going to be like, wow, you were nervous. And I was nervous, and I don't know why, because I'm very used to public speaking from my job. But at any rate, thank you all. A big thank you for being such faithful subscribers, for watching, for commenting. The comments help too, y'all. You know, engagement, right? So drop me a comment below. What is the first thing you ever canned? I'm really interested to hear that. I know mine was the pickle relish we made earlier in the season. And I think the second thing I ever canned was strawberry jam. So, you know, all the sweet stuff, right? Oop, there you go. Go on with it, canning jars. I think they're all sealed now. So I will see you all very soon. Again, thank you for your time today. And until then, y'all know what to do. Be well, be healthy, be blessed, and take care.